Welcome to Conversations Different, a podcast from the Santa Fe New Mexican, featuring the interesting people, places, and issues of Northern New Mexico. This is Inez Russell Gomez, and today we are so pleased to speak to Rebecca Solnit, author, activist, and historian. She will be appearing next month at the Santa Fe International Literary Festival. Welcome, Rebecca.
Lovely to be with you. Thank you, Inez.
I'm really excited to talk to you. And before we get into your book and what you're going to talk about, I want to get into the word mansplaining and your association with it and how you invented it or didn't invent it, but it's really part of your biography now.
As far as I can figure out, a woman who's never stepped forward to claim the credit coined the word mansplaining in 2008 in response to an essay I had just published. The essay Men Explain Things to Me, that became the title of the book in 2014 of feminist essays. And it has just continued as a word. I saw people talking about Pope-splaining when J.D. Vance tried to explain theology to the Pope. I've heard white-splaining and so many other versions. I didn't coin it. But I've come to see what a useful framework it is, and I think I prompted it.
Yes, I was going to say, you're the inspiration, it sounds like. What a great thing to have happened, because any woman, we're basically the same age. You're June 61, I'm January 61. And any woman who grew up and worked in an atmosphere where there were men or new men over those years and other women before and since knows what it's like to have them repeat what you just said back to you as if you had never said it.
Yeah, or tell you something you know a lot more about than them, as though they're the expert. And of course, the opening, anecdote in that essay was about a man explaining the book I should read. That was actually the book, if he had just shut up for a minute, he would have found out I'd written. And I've collected so many examples like that. But it can also be a much more serious business. The next anecdote in that essay is about a woman running out of the house screaming that her husband is trying to kill her in the middle of the night. And the man telling me that, chuckling, because in his upper middle class white suburb, he assumed it's quite reasonable that women are crazy, but unreasonable to think that men are homicidal. But we know that actually women, there are a lot of men are homicidal and a lot of women don't get heard when they're saying life and death things like that.
No, that's true. And we're taught to be afraid of the stranger, and really it's the guy sleeping next to you sometimes, or your uncle. That's just the world of
some of them.
Yeah. So your latest book, I assume that's the one you're going to be talking about at the festival. The Beginning Comes After the End, Notes on a World of Change. I mean, that's just a great title because it's looking at all the world's changes, in our lifetimes.
Yeah, I feel like I once said, I feel like a tortoise at a mayfly party. A mayfly in its adult phase only lives for a day or two. Tortoises can live for more than 100 years. That I wander around kind of thinking in years, decades, centuries. And I find that a lot of people don't remember the world in those time frames, so they don't see change itself. For example, I've often been told that feminism is dead or it failed or it didn't change anything. You cannot, as you just pointed out, possibly believe that if you understand what the status of women was in society and under the law, 20, 50, 60 years ago. We have changed the world radically for women. It's obviously far from perfect, but it's far more equal, far more inclusive, far more respect is expected and given, or the disrespect has been delegitimized. We even had to name a lot of it. We didn't even have the words like workplace sexual harassment, date rape, stalker, marital rape, etc., that have been so much part of law and culture changing. So yeah, I wanted to give people the equipment to understand we've changed the world profoundly in good ways to make it less misogynist, less racist, less homophobic, less environmentally destructive, to make people more aware, of these things to understand a world of less separation, less segregation, less colonialism, less environmental destruction, at least in what the majority of us want and how we think about the world. And so I wanted to give people the equipment to understand we've changed the world profoundly, to understand that the right is engaging in backlash
Yeah.
against those changes. That's its prime agenda. And to understand that we have a lot of power when we get together and we use it, because we have changed the world and we can keep on doing it if we understand how it works.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really hopeful part of the book because part of me is thinking we changed the world and now they're going to change it back and my grandchildren are going to be serfs, if I ever have any. And part of me is thinking anything that's dying is going to, put up a fight at the end. And what you're arguing is that this is their last backlash before what's new really is cemented.
Yeah, I don't think they're winning on a lot of fronts, partly because now a lot of us have experienced having rights, having power, having
Mhm.
respect, having inclusion, and we're not going back. Queer people are not going back in the closet. Dis- People with disabilities are not going to accept being marginalized and excluded the way they were, and on and on. People who now understand that everything we do in the environment has an impact are not going to forget and think that we can just start dumping and burning and logging and mining without consequences, without understanding those consequences the way we used to. You cannot make time roll backwards. And that's really the right wing agenda, is to
Yeah.
undo all the things we've done: voting rights, women's rights, reproductive rights,
Yeah.
environmental protections, climate action, all of it. And they have made a bunch of inroads with Trump, but against the will of the people for the most part. And as they're finding out, unless you establish a true terror driven authoritarian regime, the will of the people matters for a lot, especially
Yeah.
if they understand how change works and show up and make it.
No, that is true. I'm sort of like a optimistic pessimist in that I always expect the worst thing to happen. So when people have said, he won't run again, he can, it's not constitutional, I'm more like, well, he's not going to leave. You don't get. This is a different kind of playing field. But I think you're right, as we've seen with Minnesota and with the reaction to the ICE raids, that people are getting that, yes, they do have agency and they're pushing back in a way that we didn't necessarily.
I'm so glad you brought up Minnesota. That was such a remarkable display of solidarity,
Yep.
generosity, bravery as people stood up for their neighbors and refused to allow the city to be overtaken by essentially an invading army. And it's just been gorgeous to see that. And we've seen so many other examples. After 16 years, Viktor Orban was voted out in Hungary despite having taken over a lot of the media and suppressed a lot of forms of dissent and resistance. And people did not give up, because I often hear people think like there will be a point after which we in the US will not be able to do anything. And that point does not happen. People toppled the Berlin Wall, overcame the totalitarian regimes in Eastern Europe in 1989. And we see these remarkable things happen, or we have. And if we remember them, I think they inspire us to understand our power and how to use it. And if we forget them, it's so much more likely we'll feel helpless, weak,
Yeah.
uh, not and unable to act.
Yeah, that I think that's part of it is keep people entertained, keep them, tired and worried about paying their bills and they turn politics and society into what is X doing for me as opposed to what's best for the country. And I think when you vote that way, you really get bad results.
Something that's kind of driven me nuts lately is hearing Democrats talk about kitchen table issues. And I'm here in California. I have friends whose kitchen tables burned down because of climate fueled
Yeah.
wildfires. The most specific things, food on that kitchen table has to do with the price of food, which has to do with the blockade of the raw materials for fertilizer in the Strait of Hormuz because of that incredibly stupid war Trump launched on Iran. It has to do with climate chaos, tearing up crops or making something not grow in a place it used to. It has to do if grandma died before she could come to the kitchen table for for dinner because of extreme heat, which kills elders most particularly.
Yep.
And so, you know, we got to connect all these things. We got to understand how our individual personal lives are connected to the larger systems of economics, of ecology, of policy. And that's also something memory gives us. I see memory as a superpower.
Yeah. That's such a great point. And we'll get more to memory when we come back after a quick break. We'll be back soon with Conversations Different.
We make renewable doable. We're positive energy solar for a cleaner, brighter future for all. Positive energy's the right call. Feel good about your energy bill. Help save the planet too. Your trusted solar company, working hard for you. Generate positive energy. Positive energy solar.
We are back with Conversations Different, talking to Rebecca Solnit about her book, The Beginning Comes After the End. And from that title, it seems like maybe we're at the end. And as we, look at the world with war and, increased prices, gas over $4, $5, $6, whatever it is where you live, is the end over soon? I want to see the next part.
I do feel like Trump is like a last eruption of a
Mhm.
dying volcano, in some sense that the Republican Party has run itself into the ground. And the fact that he won this election by a tiny margin for a bunch of reasons was seen as a permanent thing, like, oh, now the country is very conservative. But so many young people, so many Latinos regret voting for him when they've learned what he was really here to do. But more broadly, I think in fact, I know the Republican Party hit a crossroads years ago where they either had to adjust to an increasingly progressive, increasingly racially diverse electorate, and one in which women were really showing up, women who didn't have the vote until 1920. So they either had to like adapt to who the electorate was becoming, or they had to go in the opposite direction and try and prevent, Black people in particular, people of color, poor people, students from voting and become enemies of democracy. They chose that path. And even before Trump, they were doing a lot of stuff in a lot of different ways with voting laws, gerrymandering, et cetera. And of course, as they become more and more marginal, they have to become more and more extreme and try and steal elections, disrupt voting, prevent more and more of us from voting. Just yesterday, I know this won't broadcast immediately, an attempt to create new obstacles to people voting died in the Senate after passing in the House. And I think in a way they've painted themselves into a corner. The majority of people believe in vaccination and reproductive rights and women's equality, value and respect immigrants and diversity, want to protect the environment and act on climate. So being a party against all those things doesn't really work real well unless you can really be an enemy of democracy. And they've tried it. I don't think it works for them in the long run, but I also think it's up to us to make it not work for them.
I think that that's so important because if you control who votes and if you control the systems that declare things legal or illegal because you've appointed all the judges, then you can pass whatever laws you want to put systems in place. I mean, that's how Viktor Orban stayed for 16 years, is he controlled all the systems, but it didn't last. And we hope it won't last here.
And one of the beautiful things since Trump came back into office is seeing how much, Supreme Court aside, the judges have been an incredible bulwark saying, yeah, that thing you just tried to do is illegal. That, those people you fired, that was illegal. You can't do that. You can't do that. You have to like distribute the money. You have to not do this. And the ultimate defense against authoritarianism has to be civil society. But the judges over and over have been great and also kind of funny because they're so fed up and exasperated with the illegality, the incompetence, these legal documents they're shown that were written by AI that are just crazy or full of boasts
Yep.
about, Kash Patel just submitted one that talks about how brilliant and amazing and dedicated he is in response to the Atlantic report that he's an alcoholic who does, is not showing up the way you want your FBI director to show up.
That's so, well, it's not funny. I mean, the thing with him chugging beer in the hockey locker room makes any story about him being an alcoholic so believable. I can't wait to see the discovery in that lawsuit. So, um, what do you think is the transition from this near authoritarianism or attempt at authoritarianism to a more robust, actual working democracy again?
It's something we're going to have to create. And obviously, in some ways, the system failed for this stuff to happen.
Mhm.
And so we need to change the system. I think people who are much better at understanding government, administration, justice, the law, the Constitution have much better ideas than me. But clearly, it's going to be like Reconstruction after the Civil War, reincorporating the people who tried to break the system and remaking that system to be more just, more inclusive, more functional in the wake of a catastrophe. And I know that people like Jamie Raskin in Congress are working on that. They're not just trying to fight what's going on now, but they're laying plans for what comes next. And I'm excited that that work is being done. And I'm hoping that it means that we will build a better country and a country for who we've become and what the world has become, that addresses the need for more equality, more environmental protection, more climate action, for getting money out of politics, which has so much to do with why we're in the mess we're in.
Yeah.
So, that's all I got on that one.
Yeah. Well, I think about, in our lifetimes when people talk about, the government overregulates, it's too bureaucratic, all of those things can be true. But I also used to tell my kid and to his friends, I remember lakes being on fire when I was a kid and the Erie Canal or the Love Canal and going to Los Angeles and seeing haze everywhere and wondering how people breathed in that. And I was, living in little Las Vegas, New Mexico, where if there was bad stuff happening, we didn't see it in that way in terms of pollution. Although I grew up and found out later that we had tons of pollution in New Mexico. But all of that got better with regulation. And then to
Yeah.
see, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were
No,
done.
I
But
am.
yeah, no, the Republican Party and the right has taught us to think of government as the enemy and regulation as the enemy, but regulation is why you're not getting diseases from your milk, why your meat isn't rotten when you buy it,
Yeah.
why you're not being poisoned by this, pesticides on your vegetables, why we have some air quality. 8 million people a year die of respiratory distress from burning fossil fuels. But LA is so much cleaner because I was also there on and off visiting relatives when I was a kid. It is a really different world in terms of preventing a lot of the pollution that destroys the environment and also kills human beings. And regulations can also be workplace safety, can also protect you from things like sexual harassment and racism, et cetera. And so this rhetoric of like, oh, deregulate everything, always important to ask who benefits.
Yeah. And who makes money? That's right. And they turned all of these good things into that one word insult. Oh, you're woke. And it was like, since when was it woke to be polite and to treat people as human beings?
Oh yeah, no, and it's like if you're against woke, what are you for? Being in a coma? And it's one of these weird things where it's just a piece of slang from young Black people that the right picked up and goes on and on and on about. And the woke mind virus was an obsession of Elon Musk's last year.
Yeah.
And it means, yeah, being fully aware, being tuned into the oppression of others, being committed to justice, being committed to environmental protection. And the alternative is just being brutish and destructive. And maybe we need a handier term for that.
Yeah, I think they're way better at coming up with descriptive terms that really, like death tax, woke, that, the Roadless Forest Act. They're good at terming things that opposite of what it really is. And I don't think Democrats have been as clever, or the progressive left, or whatever you want to call it. So
I agree. I
yeah,
agree.
yeah.
And yeah, I'll add that to the list of things we need to do.
On that note, we'll take a quick break and be back in a moment with more Conversations Different.
This is Patrick Dorsey, publisher of the Santa Fe New Mexican. Looking to reach a wider audience and grow your business? For 175 years, the Santa Fe New Mexican has been the trusted voice of Santa Fe, with unmatched local reach in print and online. In addition to our long-standing, independent, family-owned newspaper, we have a full-fledged marketing team with the expertise to help you succeed in the 21st century. From traditional print to precision-targeted digital advertising, we have the tools to connect you with your ideal customers. Partner with us and see the results for yourself. Advertise with the Santa Fe New Mexican and unlock your business's full potential. Visit us at santafenewmexican.com/advertising or call us at 505-995-3852. Thank you.
Welcome back to Conversations Different. Before we finish this last segment, I wanted to talk to Rebecca about her connection to Santa Fe, because turns out she comes here quite a lot and has connections here. So tell us, we always love when people are kind of rooted in New Mexico as well as just visiting.
Well, my father's sister married a Gallegos from Las Vegas, New Mexico. My mother's brother married an Anaya from Albuquerque. So I had family here, but also I lived here the first 2 years of my life, and we visited family some, but I didn't really come back as an adult till 1989. And I just immediately fell in love with the place and have been back almost every summer since. House set for the writer Lucy Lepard in Galisteo for at least a decade. And just a house sat, sublet, stayed with pretty much every summer. And I just love being there and consider it my other home, and think that those 2 years when I was a baby, we were on right off Cerrillos, not off Cerrillos, off Cordova Road, and there were cherry trees. And I just always like to think that my baby carriage was pushed out under a cherry tree, and I was looking up at the most beautiful skies in the world, and something bonded. I've always done well at really high altitude. I've been to the Himalayas with Roshi Joan Halifax, the Upaya Zen Center in Santa Fe. And I like to think those 2 years at 7,000 feet really conditioned me. So, and oh my God, red chili. I could go on and on, but I'll stop there.
That's awesome. Yeah, you were imprinted. Yeah. So my grandma is a Gallegos from Las Vegas, and Lucy Lippard is one of our great letter writers. So this is a small New Mexico world here. Yeah.
Yep.
So what's your message when you come talk to the people in Santa Fe, when you're giving your interview and your whatever you're going to do at the literary festival? Because we're this blue bubble in the flyover world, and here you're going to be. What do you tell us?
Well, I know that I was just talking to climate people about that fact that New Mexico is a blue bubble, but it's got a big climate fight on its hand to protect Chaco Canyon, to protect the state from fracking. I've talked to rancher Don Schreiber and who gave me a tour of fracking near his ranch near Farmington. But really what I'm here to talk about is memory is a superpower. If we remember how profoundly the world has changed, we understand that we have never lived in a stable world. It's always been changing, that there's a lot of good changes we should celebrate that have made life better, I think, for all of us, and that have really changed how we understand the world, around nature in particular. And I think the reemergence of Indigenous people in the 1990s as a major force in culture, society, environmental conversations, changing our understanding of what, has happened since 1492, making us understand that what we environmentalists used to treat as virgin nature was actually homeland. And, I want to talk about all those things, help people understand the change, how it was made, the power we have, because that's really equipment for continuing to do the work that matters, to protect the earth, to protect human rights, to make this country, this world as beautiful, as joyful, as safe as it can be for all of us.
Yeah, that's really hopeful. And I think that's why this book really matters right now, because I think a lot of us are feeling pretty, worried about the future of the world, both immediately and long term, if the reactionary forces stay in power. And I think you really wake us up and say, no, the agency is yours if you use it.
It's both for me. It's like, yes, there's been a shipwreck, but yes, we have lifeboats. Let's help people recognize the lifeboats, recognize what we can do to get everyone into them, build, and take it from there. So it's not that I'm not horrified, and I'm on the board of 2 climate groups, including Third Act, which has a big presence in New Mexico now.
Yes.
For people over 6, it's a climate group for people over 60, climate and democracy group, actually. But, I'm excited about the world we're making, and I'm horrified by the world that we're making. And I can hold both of those at the same time. I can even, feel heartbroken and hopeful, because hope isn't really an emotion. It's a commitment to the future, and to try and make it in the present through how we show up, how we connect.
Yeah, that is so true. And I think for a lot of people, the problem with the horror is that we were starting to think that perhaps that would be permanent. And again, what you do so well is remind us that it's not permanent. They're both here, and now we work for what we want next. And that's just always, when people feel like they can make a change, I think the change will happen.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people felt when this new Trump administration started that, they were just going to become totally authoritarian. And then, it was going to be the 1,000-year Reich, except the 1,000-year Reich didn't last 1,000 years either.
Nope.
And Trump, from what I can tell, is literally falling apart. And somebody said to me yesterday, nature is taking its revenge. It's eating him alive. But he just seems to be actively decaying mentally, physically, and he's certainly falling apart politically. Nobody knows what comes after this. We've never been in a situation like this before, but nobody knows. There's a sense of the future is not yet written. We write it with how we show up in the present. And so I write really to give people equipment to make that future, to find their power, to find these possibilities. People are often afraid of uncertainty, but another word for uncertainty is possibility. A certain future is one in which nothing is demanded of us because it's all already been decided. But that's a fiction. We make the future in the present, and the better equipped we are to do that, the better we do at it. And memory, understanding that we live in a radically changing world, that all the good stuff has been brought about by visionaries, by movements, by coalitions, by campaigns, by civil society action, equips us to keep doing it and to keep moving towards these good things, that, to keep cultivating these seeds that were planted in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s on through just a few years ago.
Yeah, that is a really beautiful summation, and it reminds again why people read your work. And I bet you're already sold out, and hopefully in town, maybe you'll get around and people will get to hear you in other places, even if it's just a conversation at Connie's or something,
Oh yeah, I promised to do something in Albuquerque and something in Taos a while in June, and I'll be at Upaya in August, and I'll always be coming back because northern New Mexico is also home, and I'm just so excited to return.
Oh, that's wonderful. And on that note, this has been another Conversations Different. We'll be back next week. Thank you for listening to Conversations Different, hosted by me, Inez Russell Gomez, editorial page editor for the Santa Fe New Mexican. Our weekly episodes would not be possible without your support.
We hope you enjoy them and keep listening. New episodes drop every Tuesday. Consider signing up for our newsletter so you never miss an episode, and while you're at it, consider subscribing to the Santa Fe New Mexican. Our podcast is available by visiting our website, santafenewmexican.com/podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Conversations Different with Inez Russell Gomez is produced by Matt Dalside and Ernesto Cisneros, published by the Santa Fe New Mexican, a local and independent newspaper owned by Robin Martin.